I read this book in 26 minutes. And you know what? Now I'm feeling more prepared to develop our next generation of artists because I better understand brightness, cultural interpreters, and gifts. So let's get into it. This is 26-minute reads with me, Mya D. And this reading vlog is kind of like my accountability space because in these videos, I share my takeaways from my current read. This is book number three of my 26 to 26 challenge where I'm reading 26 minutes per day, every day. So let's be clear, this is more like slow reading rather than speed reading. It's also an act of self-love and investment into myself in a way of providing myself with some consistency in an ever-changing world. And I hope that all of that sounds really great and is encouragement for you to join me along in this journey by reading along with me and dropping some comments and your thoughts in that comment section so there's an actual dialogue going on. Well, this week I read pages 85 through 106 of Skin Color Points by Dr. Niyama McCartney Brown. And let's get into these takeaways. Let me get my notes. Takeaway number one is brightness. And on page 87 of the book, we find these words, and I quote, "When I get into a studio and I have a diverse group of students, it is important to make them aware of their accents. What is bright in them?" End quote. So these words can be found in an interview from Caridad Martinez, who has past affiliations with the National Ballet of Cuba, the Havana Ballet, and has current and present day affiliations with the American Ballet Theater, the Ailey School, the Brooklyn Ballet, and Ballet Hispanico. Martinez is one of the 13 interviews included in the book, and the previous quote was in response to being asked how the culture of the students that she's teaching now is different or similar to the Cuban culture that she was raised in, and how she implements, what kind of strategies and methods she implements in order to navigate those differences or similarities. Now, at the beginning of the interview, we are informed that Martinez's native language is Spanish, right? And I bring that into play because in response, when responding to this question, she begins by saying, "I'm not sure that I really understand the question, but here is how I approach teaching." And this idea of the accent, right? The students have an accent and what is bright in them stuck out with me as an approach to culturally relevant teaching, right? So I'm teaching to the person that is in front of me. I'm teaching to that person specifically. Seeing their accent, I believe, is Martinez saying that she's looking at how the students are individuals, and that brightness being what makes them shine, and valuing that as she then teaches technique for them, right? To me, this sounds like developing the whole artist rather than just developing technicians. I'm going to say that again. This approach to me sounds like a way of developing, holistically developing an artist rather than just a technician. This approach seems like a healthy alternative to that breaking people down and building them up method that some of us might have experienced when we were growing up or in our training. I love this idea of the brightness because it is in that brightness that the artistry is revealed, right? It's that artistry that is a thing that helps people to get jobs and get roles, right? It's not just about being a technician. There also has to be something that is inside of you, something that you emote, exemplify, that makes you a little different. That brightness, that accent. Many times I've heard of dancers trying to find their individual voice after they have had several years of training. And it sounds like the way that Martinez approaches this classroom teaching, it holds space for that individual voice, that artistry, that brightness, that accent, as she teaches the technique around it, right? So building that whole artist sounds like a holistic approach, a culturally relevant approach that Martinez is taking with inside of the classroom. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think that it's also a beautiful way to, well, I don't know. I spoke. I want to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below as we step into takeaway number 2, which is cultural interpreter. In an interview with Crystal Michelle Perkins, and on page 98 of the book, we find these words, and I quote, "But there were times in which you had to be a translator of norms or customs, either from home to the ballet school or from the ballet school to your family. Can you talk a little bit about those translations and what you were doing as a cultural interpreter?" So that quote is actually the question that our author is offering Crystal Michelle Perkins. And this idea of a cultural interpreter reminded me of a previous interview in the book where we're introduced to Sister Teresa, the sister that is acting as, or not acting, but literally translating information between the institutions and her family, because she is bilingual. She speaks Spanish and English, and is able to translate information from the institution to her mother specifically, because her mother does not speak English. In both of these situations, meaning the experience with Teresa in the earlier interview and in this one, I believe that we're speaking of converting information into a form that is easily digestible to the family that is going to be impacted. This idea of a cultural interpreter also reminds me of an earlier book that we read, which was Culturally Responsive Teaching, that encouraged the educator. Gotta flip the page over. We got a lot of notes. That encourage the educator to craft the knowledge in a way that the student feels that it is valuable in the moment, not just in the future, right? And in this case, in the case with this cultural interpreter that we're speaking of in this interview with Martinez, we see that it is the role of the young person, and not the educator, but is the role of the young person in converting this information into a format that is digestible and valuable to their family, right? So we're talking about things like understanding why it is important to have certain things. Sorry, my phone is like, you've been talking all day. So I hope that we're still with each other. We're talking about the student having to translate to their family these dance practices and why certain things need to be done. They gave an example of the students receiving flowers before the performance, and the student having to communicate to their family, like, this is a tradition that is done. Sorry about that hiccup. I'm still in the learning curve as I'm learning to create these long form videos. But the student acting as that cultural interpreter, in this case, she is talking about why this giving of the flowers is a cultural, an example of a value that is placed in this cultural community, being the dance community, and why her family should understand it and take that on. And also interpreting things the other way, explaining to the dance studio that her family shows their appreciation in a very vocal way during the performance. So acting as a cultural interpreter means that the student is communicating these values both ways into both of these communities that they are invested in. And that is work. And I think that as an educator, it is important to remember, well, this is another example of how our students are working both on the floor and off the floor, and the importance of listening to them so that we understand the values, where their values are, what the communities that they are coming from, so that we can help them to have the language, the resources, so that they can communicate these values across both of these spaces. As we step into our third and final takeaway, I think it's also important for me to say that while I do have experience as a dancer, as an educator, as a curriculum writer, I am not the know-all be-all for this book. I'm simply providing a space for dialogue so that we are better educators to those that are in front of us and those that are coming after us. Our final takeaway number 3 is gift. Have you ever heard the something along the lines of a gift and a curse? Right? That thing that is what makes you special can also be the thing that can sometimes give you a little bit of trouble. I think that being an educator is certainly a gift, and that sometimes it can be a challenge. And this last quote from the book is an example of that. On page 106, we find these words, and I quote, "One of the things that she does is identify a gift someone has before they can see it, and then make space, a place, or an opportunity for that gift to happen," end quote. These words are actually coming from Crystal Michelle Perkins, and they are in response to the question of what she's taken from her relationship with Debbie Blunden Diggs and how she uses those things with her young dancers. As several times I've been told, it's not okay to base decisions on a person's potential, right? Some of you might have heard that. Let me know if you've heard something along that line, which is very difficult as an educator because essentially that's our job. Our job is to identify this potential in someone and to fan the flames that will help that potential grow into something that's productive, right? So you're seeing the gift in someone, you're speaking to it, and you're allowing it to grow. You're speaking to their potential. And at the same time, that gift of being an educator and being able to see that gift in somebody else is not always welcome, because once again, you might be seeing that gift before that person is aware of it and is ready to accept it, or it might be in a space that is off the dance floor, right? So they're still not ready to accept it. They're not in a space to hear what you are offering. I believe that people are called to be educators, that this is inherently a part of us, and therefore it's hard to turn off, especially when it's the thing that makes you successful. It's the thing that helps you to receive your blessings and so forth. It's the thing that people remember you by, which is why the interviewee is bringing this thing up. She saw that gift and she was able to speak to it. So here's my question of my educators. How do you navigate turning off the gift of seeing somebody's gift? And do you find it challenging to turn it off? And do you find it challenging to turn it off? Let me know in the comments below. You can also drop the name of a great book in the comments below, because I'm always looking for the title to read next. You can also just drop a book emoji so that I know that you were here with me. Thank you for staying along to the end. If you found this video interesting or you liked it in any other kind of way, remember to like it, to subscribe, to come back. Spread a good word. I'll see you again soon. Oh, wait. Remember, there's things in those details there.